In the following episode of Westworld FM, we discuss some speculation about future plotlines that may alter your perception of the show and affect the way that you watch it. I can't call it a spoiler because in the end it may not be true, but if you do not wish to hear any speculation about the show, please skip this episode, and in the following episodes we will relegate this discussion to the end of the episode in its own section that is clearly marked and will allow you to exit before hearing it. So, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you listen to this one because I think it's great. And if not, we will see you next week. Welcome to Westworld FM, a podcast about HBO's Westworld. My name is Alex.
And my name is Nick.
Today we're going to be discussing episode 2 of the show titled Chestnut. While we'll not be discussing any next time on information on the show, we will be spoiling the whole first and second episode of the series. So if you have not watched either of those yet, please hit pause here and go check out the episode before listening to the rest of this podcast. But you can find more of our episodes at westworld.fm. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can send feedback to westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on air. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. So, episode 2, Chestnut. We can dive right in here. The episode starts off where we see Dolores laying in bed, but she gets awoken by a voice. Kind of sounds like several voices put together. I don't know if you got that vibe to it. But I also felt like I kind of heard a little bit of Peter Abernathy, Lewis Hertham's Peter Abernathy, yes, in there too. She walks outside and stares into the night as the voice asks, "Do you remember?" And then we cut to a futuristic train ride where we see Jimmy Simpson as William waking up on the train with his friend Logan, played by Ben Barnes. Logan's been to the park many times, and this is William's first visit to Westworld. And we see how the guests enter into the facility. They dock their futuristic train docks at this command center, and then we see the guest entrance. William gets greeted by a host who asks him a panel of questions to ensure he's in good health, and he says, "I thought that you couldn't get hurt here," and she ends up responding, "Only the right amount," which was her joke. Kind of, maybe, if it was a joke. Maybe it's not. And then we see a different looking Westworld logo in the entrance lobby. Did you notice that?
I did not.
It looks like a backslash and a V instead of the /W/.
Right.
Which many people... Now, here's some speculation from the interwebs. Many people are theorizing that it's an older Westworld logo.
The V is older.
Yes.
And not the W.
And that Jimmy Simpson, or William, and Logan are in the past. Whereas everything else that we've seen so far is potentially in the future.
Interesting.
The main through line of this postulation is that potentially William is the man in black. Yeah, so maybe William is the 30 years ago when the man in black first went to the place.
That's super cool.
So we can talk about that more. I think there's a counterexample in the episode that may prove this wrong, but it's really hard because of how wishy-washy they could be being with the timeline.
Of course.
But it seems like a Nolan thing to do, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's got some Nolan on it.
Yeah. So go back and check that logo if you want to see it. I don't know if we've seen the /W/ in episode 1 or anywhere. I'm not certain. I wanted to go back and check that, but I haven't had the time to do it yet. But William's host takes him to go gear up and dress up. There's some pretty good conversation with them as he's kind of sussing out whether or not she's a host and what that means to him and how he should act around her and what he should do. And then he says, "Well, what do most people do?" And she says, "You don't have to worry about what most people would do." And that's the first kind of act break in the episode. What did you think about the world building of here's how you get into Westworld?
I think it's cool that they carried over that device from the movie. The two guys coming together that are friends, quote unquote, or seem like they're coworkers at least.
Yeah.
One who has been there before and is comfortable with it and familiar with it is a little more overtly masculine, a little more aggressive with the whole situation, and the other one is kind of a bystander who seems like he's recovering from some failed relationship, or he's got that on his mind.
Yeah.
So I like that they carried that over from the movie, because initially I thought they weren't going to carry anything over from the movie but the premise. And I think having those two counterparts kind of opposite each other is kind of fun to watch, and it's a good way for you to get further acquainted with Westworld.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Explore kind of the both sides of the coin.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
terms of Westworld.
I like the casting of Jimmy Simpson a lot. I think he's really cool. I think he's really funny. I only know him from like comedic work for the most part.
Whenever I see him, I can only think of the McPoyles from It's Always Sunny, but I love him. I like him a lot. So it's kind of hard for me. Like, it takes me a minute to forget that he's in It's Always Sunny.
Yeah, but he's really good in this so far. He seems like he's in kind of an amused daze the whole time. Like, he's just kind of taking it in and isn't really sure if he wants to buy in or not.
Yeah.
And whereas Ben Barnes is just the sleaziest.
I think in the past you've said that you're not a huge fan of Ben Barnes. Is that true?
I don't think so, because I don't think I've seen him.
You don't think you have you don't have enough of enough stuff to have an opinion on him? Because the only thing I know him as, he was Prince Caspian in
right.
Narnia.
That's the only credit I know, and I haven't seen that movie.
Because when I was watching this, I was like, I wonder how he feels about Ben Barnes. I think it's a very.
He's in. Okay, so he's in Stardust. I didn't know that.
Okay.
I haven't seen Seventh Son. I have seen Stardust. I just don't remember him for some reason.
Yeah, it's been a while since I watched Stardust, which is a great movie.
It is a great movie. Oh, he's just the young version of Charlie Cox.
Okay. Yeah. So did you like Ben Barnes in this? I guess
he's
is the
not
question.
Charlie Cox. He's somebody related to Charlie Cox. Doesn't matter. He's also in The Punisher, apparently, the Netflix Punisher.
Oh, cool.
That's neat. I'm sorry, what was your question?
So I guess what matters is, did you like Ben Barnes in this role?
Yeah, he was. He's good. He's kind of. He did a good job being an American, I think, which was kind of surprising, because I know he's English, and he did a great job with that. He's definitely comes across as the kind of slick. He, what's really funny. So in the first one, it's oh God, I'm totally blanking on his name. It's Brolin, James Brolin, who plays that role essentially. Yep. And the whole time I was watching that movie, I was like thinking it seemed like a dead ringer for Christian Bale to me. Like, they look so similar. And in this movie, I was watching this and I was thinking, man, Christian Bale would play that part so well that Ben Barnes is playing, because he reminds me a lot of Patrick Bateman. Yeah, and like his kind of attitude and aggression. And so it's just kind of funny that Christian Bale, in my mind, apparently is meant to play this role. Yeah. In Westworld.
I think Ben Barnes' Logan is a little more sleazy than James Brolin has ever seen to be in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's way more turned up for like he's much more of like the 2016 version, I think, of what we would picture. Because James Brolin in the original isn't really. He's not really being bad. He's doing like some morally gray things at worst. He's really just kind of enjoying himself. Yeah. And he's not doing anything terribly like offensive. Yeah. And plus the Westworld in the original, they're way more robotic. And exactly. It's not as scary as when somebody just starts like hurting people. Yeah. And as in this version, it's really horrifying. But yeah, he just treats it with such disregard. Mm-hmm. And like to him, it's all just frivolity. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And it's funny because like I was saying about Jimmy Simpson, he's very kind of detached from the situation most of the time. Even when Logan gets very violent, Jimmy Simpson reacts, but it's not this strong reaction. It's just kind of like, whoa.
He hasn't fully immersed himself in the world yet. Right. He hasn't accepted. He has not suspended his disbelief.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
I guess would be the.
He has not yet been seduced by Westworld, it seduces everyone.
Yes, according to Logan.
Yeah.
All right. So next up, we've got Elsie going over the footage of Peter Abernathy, flummoxed by the idea that he doesn't immediately crash upon finding the photo, as other hosts have been affected by this bug that they've found have done. So she realizes that he takes the photo and he gets home and he's pondering it the whole time, which is weird it's something they haven't seen before.
And he thinks about it all night, right? They say he's just kind of looking at it over the course of an entire night.
Yeah. And Bernard is kind of very dismissive of it, as we kind of see. And she kind of calls him on protecting Ford, because I don't think that he last week explained to everybody that, this was code that Ford wrote. He just kind of was like, there's an error in the update. Elsie theorizes that Peter Abernathy's failure could be contagious, so to speak, and she wants to pull the host that he's been in contact with, but Bernard kind of shoots that issue down. We see Dolores come to town and start doing her routine, but she stops in the street when the man's voice says, "Remember," and she sees the bloodbath and the shootout from last week, I think.
I think so. Yeah.
And we see a wolf in the shot. I don't know if there's anything that means as of yet, but Maeve pulls her out of it, and Dolores tells her these violent delights have violent ends, which kind of makes Maeve's head turn, and she begins to kind of mull the phrase over. Any thoughts about that section of the show? I think it's pretty straightforward, and that I think that's kind of weird or cool that that string of that sentence is kind of the contagion.
Yeah.
Like, why is that? Is that a phrase that everybody has said at one point or another, or like how or why is that activating these people and being able to remember their former code? I think that's interesting. So hopefully we learn a little more about that in the future. So then we see William come out of the dressing room in a very conservative kind of attire. He picks a white hat and heads through the door that leads him onto a train into Westworld, where he meets up with Logan. What did you think of that little sequence, just heading through a door and then magically on the train into Westworld?
That was very cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure you thought of Tron.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's very, yeah.
I thought of you thinking of Tron before I had any original thoughts. Like that shot of him walking down the hallway.
Absolutely.
I was like,
yeah.
Alex is going to love this.
That's the way, like, it certainly feels as though he gets all geared up and then he just walks into the hallway, into the light, and boom.
Yeah, that was really neat.
Yeah.
Cool transition, and I don't understand exactly what happened, and I think Logan even has a line to that effect of like, don't try to figure it out. Or he says like something to the line. He says, shit, I'm going to mess it up now. He kind of just said a statement in regards to kind of like, don't try and
pick it apart.
Don't try to figure it out. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this is where he says this place seduces everyone eventually, which was a nice,
it's a cool
nice
line.
thing. So then we cut to a sheriff hanging Donald Pardue, or that's what his name is right now anyway, at the gallows, where the man in black shows up and proceeds to kill everybody and then take Donald to find the entrance to the maze, as he calls it. My next note just says in all caps, Ed Harris hamming it up. And then I have the quote, "How about I tell my men to dig that grave a couple feet deeper?" And then he says, "Well, it's going to be awful crowded in there for all you." I was like, oh.
Yeah, we got some real good old Westy dialogue
absolutely
out of this scene, which is good. Like I said in the pilot episode, we got a lot of that out of James Marsden.
Yep.
When he's talking to Dolores, now we got a lot of that good old Western kind of banter.
Yeah.
And now it's Ed Harris's turn to shoot some of that.
Yep. So the man in black kills everybody, and then he takes Donald, but he calls him Lawrence, which I assume is one of his former programs or something like that. And shows him this maze symbol that's on Kissy's scalp, and he thinks Donald knows more about it, but Donald just denies it. So he drags him along somewhere. We don't know where. Clifton Collins Jr. plays Donald. Very awesome. / Lawrence. Yeah. If you don't know Clifton Collins Jr., you do know Clifton Collins Jr., so go look up his IMDb page and see all of the credits that he's got, because he's awesome. And then any reason to stop? You can feel free to stop me when I hit something that you want to talk about if I don't stop.
Oh, I think the gunfight part was really cool. I like that we didn't really get to see.
Yeah, you see one person get shot in the background, out of focus.
It's a cool way to do it. I like that we've kind of established that the man in black is actually kind of a force to be reckoned with. In a real life gun battle, he could do some damage, which is kind of neat. When you watch it initially, you're kind of like, oh, the hosts are helpless. Like, of course, anybody would best them in a fight. But when you're watching it now, with kind of the knowledge you have of the man in black in mind, you're like, wow, he can actually like shoot.
Yeah.
When he just kills Teddy Flood in the first episode, it's kind of like,
because it's not like he's the dude just coming off of the street and his accuracy is all over the place, and he's like wasting a ton of ammo.
He's not the guy from the first episode who killed Rodrigo Santoro point blank. No, he's got some
got some chops.
Yes, exactly. Even more so later in the episode.
Yeah.
We find out.
And then next we cut to the player piano, as we noted last week, potentially playing Radiohead's No Surprises. I couldn't pick it out of there, but Nick, you
I would say that was definitely the song. I don't remember what scene it was in.
Okay. So there's 2 player piano shots in here. It could be one or the other. I'm not sure which. If you guys listening have any idea what any of the songs are and we don't know, please write in and let us know.
Or what they might mean.
Yeah, that too.
I haven't even begun to dissect
Yeah.
what No Surprises might be doing in the episode.
Yeah. I'm still kind of the mind that maybe these are just little musical things hidden in Westworld to remind people of like, oh, hey, you're in old-timey land. But it seems weird that they would rip people out of the narrative like that.
Yeah, plus those are pretty interesting song choices.
Yeah.
They're both songs with some depth to them. And Black Hole Sun I could maybe see because that's like a song that's kind of on the radio and was big in like the 90s. But No Surprises is a really strange
It's not the Radiohead song you would pick, right?
Yeah.
So, and like Creep would probably be the one if they wanted to do that.
I wouldn't be shocked if it showed up at some point.
Potentially, yeah. And then we see Maeve having trouble kind of closing the deal, quote unquote, as she starts remembering some kind of brutal scenario where her scalp is about to be cut off.
Mm-hmm.
Maeve gets pulled out for diagnostic because she's pulling low numbers, and the narrative people are just kind of like, well, just make her more aggressive, put her up 10% so maybe she can start closing the deal more, otherwise she's going to get decommissioned. And then we cut to Ford walking up to Bernard, and they kind of talk a little bit about what happened and how Elsie has a theory about. He doesn't name Elsie, but Bernard brings up the idea that that potentially Peter has been able to process something differently than the other hosts, and Ford just kind of is intrigued by the idea, but you know. And then we cut to Logan and William getting off of the train, and they get a nice little, you see Jimmy Simpson being nice and everything as he knocks into the guy, and then Logan's like, no, F you, blah, blah, blah. That kind of thing.
The giant guy.
To the giant guy who he's like 8 feet tall. But then also something to note is that we see a bunch of Union soldiers where the sheriff was last week talking about Hector and trying to take down Hector.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is maybe another clue that we could be in a different time period, but it could also be, the Hector storyline's done for now.
Yeah.
So it could go either way in terms of the interwebs theory of Jimmy being in the past, or William, I guess is his name in the show. So then Logan explains to William that basically all the people that he's seeing have some kind of narrative prompt to them. The old guy who falls over in the street, you can help him out and he'll tell you where there's buried treasure. Mm-hmm. Or, just any of the people around have some kind of storyline connected to them.
Everyone's an NPC with some sort of fetch quest for you.
Exactly.
Try out.
But Logan is kind of completely uninterested in that aspect of it. So I think
he wants to free roam.
Yeah, he wants to free roam in Red Dead, pretty much. So then we see Dolores catching her reflection in the window and staring. This is the part to me that almost disproves the past theory, because we see Jimmy and Logan walk into the saloon as the camera focuses on Dolores. So I don't know if the Dolores stuff is happening in the past too somehow. It kind of works out because the Man in Black talks, or at some point it's talked about how there was an incident 30 years ago, potentially, somewhere. That could mean that Dolores was maybe a part of that. But I don't know. It's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around it at the moment as to whether or not they've covered their tracks in respect to this theory, or if there's any ground to the theory.
Yeah, maybe not. It might be one of those things where it's
total red herring.
It's cooler than the truth actually.
Exactly. Which is a line that is brought up in this episode, because Ed Harris later on, the Man in Black, says outside, it's all jumbled together, chaos. But in here, every detail has meaning. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of funny that we're talking about an internet theory.
That's true.
It's like a snake eating its own tail.
No, it's true. I mean, yeah, everything is designed.
Yeah.
Everything has evidence of design and has to be there for a reason.
Yeah.
In a way, I mean, that is the way TV and movies are. Everything you're seeing for a reason. It didn't just get shot by happenstance, especially a show that's shot on a set or like a stage that's been built.
Yeah.
So no, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So then we cut to Bernard and Dolores having a little bit of a private chat. This is in like some kind of back room or something in the maintenance wing, which suggests to me that the narration at the beginning of the previous episode must have been this little chat where Bernard is telling Dolores how Westworld works.
Here is kind of where I think we're being played with chronologically.
Okay.
I think the scene at the beginning of this episode and the scene at the beginning of the first episode, I'm trying to remember. I think the first episode started with something that was a little bit of a shuffle, or it didn't seem to have context. I'm trying to remember now what it was. But anyway, I think we might be seeing pieces of Dolores' story that don't take place with anything else chronologically. And especially in regards to Bernard. I think there's a lot more to Bernard than...
Yeah, so we're kind of seeing that maybe Bernard has ulterior motives going on here. He's seeding something into... Potentially he's the reason that these things are happening. Like these crazy happenstances where updates are...
Yeah, this episode seems to kind of point the show's finger at Bernard a little bit, and I don't know whether or not that's
it could be a red herring.
Yeah, exactly. It feels kind of like it's too early
to show that hand.
Yeah, but who's to say that it's not the right time? I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
it definitely seemed there's definitely something going on, especially because he's erasing logs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he's trying to cover his tracks so that nobody else knows what's going on.
Yeah,
but Bernard runs. So Bernard has been having these little talks. This is perhaps not the first one. Maybe it's the second one. Who knows? There may have been more. But he wants to know this time is if anybody has updated her core heuristics, which core heuristics means like a decision-making model. It's like a decision tree almost.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly who would have done that or why he's asking her. Maybe this is maybe what he's doing here is a deeper dive than what Ashley did, Luke Hemsworth did in the previous episode.
Yeah, we were talking about how in the pilot we were surprised that he was able to sit down and run through the same sort of interrogation or diagnostic with her that the programming team was, considering he seems like he's sort of a security type of person. I still haven't really gotten a hold on what his role is there. Yeah,
and that, I think, to me, that could have been just the fact that they probably needed all hands on deck because they took 10% of the people out of the population and they wanted to get them back out there as soon as possible. But
yeah, the fact that he was trained to do that and given true. Clearance, I thought was interesting. But definitely with Bernard, he would know what questions to ask and what questions he can ask. Like, you wouldn't just sit if you didn't think to quiz this, because they all the employees view them as machines for sure.
Yeah.
And so they would just know, like, okay, here, I know that these are my 200 different options of question I can ask them, but Bernard might know, a lot more than they do in terms of the sorts of things he can ask them and certain key phrases and that sort of thing that he can go through. I wonder with a machine as big as Westworld seems to be, with a product so unique and so volatile, I wonder who is the countermeasure against Bernard? Because it seems like there would be something.
What are the checks and balances of the society?
Who is there if Bernard quits or Bernard goes off the reservation? Like, who is there to?
To me, the way that we're given it right now, it seems that Ford is above Bernard. I think Ford is probably on the shareholders board, but he's also like the lead programmer or senior programmer, whereas Bernard's probably like a lead programmer, and then Elsie is probably like a junior programmer or something like that.
Well, Ford strikes me as just kind of the Bruce Wayne CEO, like the 51% shareholder who he has the say. He can overturn or veto something if he wants to.
Yeah.
And some things need his approval. We know storylines need his approval, that sort of thing. So I think he's definitely beyond just the programming team.
Yeah.
I think Bernard might be the lead programmer, and Ford just has the ability to tell him, like, no, I don't want you to do that. But
Ford also did some programming.
Oh yeah, that's definitely, I would say, where his
what he actually cares about,
where
in the
he
business.
Started, like where he came up. When he was a young man, he was probably a programmer with like an idea.
Okay.
Because we know this is his creation.
Mm-hmm.
but we also know that he's not necessarily a writer, but he knows what people want and what they don't want, sort of thing. He's almost kind of like the Steve Jobs in a way, or the I'm blanking on Lee Pace's name from *Halt and Catch Fire*, but
Joe McMillan.
Yeah. So
Could you hear the gears turning in my head? Like I
was surprised by the blank look on your face as you were trying to figure out what it was.
I had to shut down all other systems in order to divert power.
To reroute power.
Yeah.
He can't necessarily write code, but he knows how to sell something.
Yeah.
So he's an interesting mix of like several different skills, but not all of the skills.
Yeah.
I like Ford a lot.
I do too.
Every scene with him, I have enjoyed a lot so far.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what's going on with Bernard here. I don't think we're supposed to know yet either, though. So we can talk a little bit more about that later. Back to the player piano, we see Maeve hitting on a girl this time, but the girl rebuffs her, and Maeve ends up meeting Clementine at the bar and confronts her about her nightmares that she's been having. Maeve actually ends up having more flashbacks, and Teddy kind of sees her and asks if she's okay. But security and operations notice that she's having some kind of issue, and they mark her for decommissioning. And then they make Clementine take over her role. Bernard meets with Cullen to explain that they're ready for the new narrative, but also explain why their department is still asking questions about Peter Abernathy, because Elsie was looking at the video still, and he just kind of tells her, well, we're supposed to be the ones asking questions. So he kind of covers for Elsie there a little bit. And then we cut to Logan and William eating in public, and William's like, how do you tell the difference between hosts and guests? And Logan just pulls up his gun and is ready to shoot somebody. But William stops him. But then the older man who fell over in the street earlier with the treasure quest notices William and walks up to him and starts to give him the quest, but then Logan just stabs him in the hand and basically just decides, no, we're not doing this. And then he's worked up another appetite, and then he goes sleeps with 3 women and 1 man. So he's doing it big, I guess.
He's busy. Getting his money's worth.
Yep. But Clementine is with William, and William turns her down because he has a true love at home, is what he says. So we talked a little bit before the podcast.
He says he has someone at home. Does he say waiting for? Or I have someone at home waiting for me, something like that.
Something along those lines.
She's the one who calls it true love.
Yeah, that's true.
She says
that's true.
True love is worth waiting for. That's what she says.
Yeah. So maybe it's not love.
Yeah, he seems to. It's definitely a more complex relationship than, oh, my wife's at home.
Yeah, well, and that's it. To me, it reads almost as if like, oh, I'm just getting out of a relationship kind of thing, or my wife died, or like, you know, like,
or
who knows?
I'm pining for someone who doesn't know.
Yeah,
or I think is kind of how Clementine takes it.
Yeah. And I guess I'm being a little heteronormative because it may not be a wife, but
yes,
who knows? Anything to talk about here yet?
No, I think I had mentioned this a little bit before the show, but a very distilled version of what I was saying. I think that there's a lot more to the Jimmy Simpson character in terms of this relationship than meets the eye. I think there's something more going on there, because they did carry that aspect of that character over from the film, but it was very cut and dry. And
it was very like, you're getting over the divorce.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
She got everything and blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, and he's kind of like, oh, I miss her still, that sort of situation.
Yeah.
And with Jimmy Simpson, it's very, Logan doesn't even bring it up. And he may not even know, because she says, sounds like your friend is having fun. And he says, it's not the word I would use. And she says, what, fun? And he says, no, friend. So whether it's just that they are, you know, buddies from like youth or whatever from school, but he's not really that good of a friend to him, or if they're more coworkers, because I think he brings up something about work, and he says, you said you didn't want to talk about work here.
And he says, who says this isn't work?
Yeah.
Is what Logan says to that. So, yeah, who knows?
I wonder, too, what exactly, if there's a little more to
that. To me, almost brings up the idea that it could be, because there were rumors or ideas or thoughts that the Man in Black was some kind of corporate espionage trying to figure out.
Yeah, we talked about that last episode.
Yeah, so maybe Logan and William's work is that they're trying to build up another kind of attraction park like this or something like that. But that's wild
Logan's
speculation.
doing research.
Yeah, quote unquote research. But yeah. So now we open up in the body shop, I think is what they refer to it in the show. And Sizemore, the head of narrative department, is down there unhappy with the Native American lead that they've built for him. And he breaks its nose because he thinks it looks like a penis between his eyes. But Cullen sees this outburst and informs him that his Savage Horde request for 50 or more hosts has been declined, and he will only get 20 of them for his new storyline that he's building. And he's bummed out at that. Or the way that he discusses it, he's just kind of like, what do they care? Money is no object to these people, but clearly they do care. They don't want him to run wild with this thing.
Or they're using them for something else.
That's true too.
It's kind of what I took it as. Like, the resources need to be allocated to something different.
Yeah, that's fair. And then we see Ford in some kind of utility tunnel taking an elevator up into Westworld, and he meets a young boy. You're better at remembering dialogue than me, so you might remember some of the more poignant stuff between them. But the vibe that I got was that this boy was maybe based on a young version of Ford.
Yeah,
because Ford says something that his father used to say,
it seems so obvious that it's almost
the boy's kind of like, well, my father says that too.
Yeah, and he's dressed in like older kind of schoolboy English.
Yeah.
What we think of when we picture like an English schoolboy kind of thing. He's wearing like little shorts that are kind of like overalls, and it seems like you would have caught him running around the corner with like a little kite, or like playing with like a loop thing.
Yeah, hoop and stick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or playing kick the can in the sand by himself.
Which is funny. It's funny. We just did a kind of retro review, or keyframes as we call it, as of Fight Club on the Midwest Film Nerds, and I don't know if I would have cued into the fact that their fathers said the same thing if I hadn't just watched Fight Club, because there's a similar clue in that movie as well. So I thought that was kind of fun. But yeah, so then we cut. Did you want to say anything else about that scene? Great dialogue. We haven't gotten to the magic part yet. But
No. I do think it is cool, though. I think, like I said, as soon as he comes up and then the little boy, he's kind of in the desert and the little boy's just there, I was like, well, that's him. Like right off the bat. And that's what I mean. Like, it seems so on the nose that it could easily be something else. And they're kind of like, you dummies. You thought that was a young version of him. But it could be his son.
Yeah, it might just mean that Ford puts dialogue and memories and things in these people, or like.
No, I think that boy's there for a reason, for sure, because Ford's access tunnel can't come out anywhere remotely near the central populated area of Westworld.
Yeah,
I think that tunnel is what the Man in Black is trying to find. He's trying to find the way
that
in
entrance to the
command
stage,
whatever we want to call it. And that boy seems like he was placed there to pretty much
like a security protocol.
Well, either that or only for Ford to just talk to.
Yeah. And
kind of either remember his youth or his son. It may be his son that died, and maybe the father he's referring to is himself, and he kind of thought of his.
Yeah.
Ford definitely is the type of guy who, with near infinite wealth and time and programming knowledge, he would build weird little things to amuse himself. He's almost like Sebastian from Blade Runner, where he's making little toy friends to keep himself company because he's lonely, sort of thing. I think it's really cool.
It's a very cool
no matter
scene,
what it is. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And makes me still want to learn more about Ford and his past.
Absolutely. And then we cut to the Man in Black bringing Donald/Lawrence to Lawrence's hometown, and basically showing, oh, hey, you didn't tell me that you had a family. I'm here in this town where all of your family is. And Lawrence's wife and daughter run up to him. And then as I referenced earlier, the Man in Black says something along the lines of, the real world is chaos, an accident. In Westworld, every detail adds up to something, is what he says, which I think is interesting and a cool way to look at why he's so intrigued by the game, quote unquote. And then the Man in Black kind of threateningly starts placing bullets on the table. He can't get any of this maze information out of Donald or Lawrence. And then we cut to a shot of security, or Ashley and his right-hand man or somebody. An underling of some sort brings this Man in Black to Ashley's attention, being like, oh, he's killed a lot of people already. Should we slow him down, is what he says. And then Ashley says, that gentleman gets whatever he wants. So I feel like that line's very telling, but I don't know what it tells me yet. It tells me that they're aware of this man in black, that he's important to somebody involved in the park, like in the command center or something along the lines of that. I don't really know what it means yet, but it seems like it's some kind of flare of importance.
That's funny. I didn't take it that way at all.
No?
No, I thought he just, because I don't remember him actually even really looking too much at the monitor. I think I thought it was just more of a blanket statement of the people who come here get whatever they want.
Really?
They can do whatever they want. Yeah, because I didn't notice him really take a good look at it and be like, oh, no, like he seemed very throwaway. Like the guy was coming to him with the iPad and be like, hey, should we stop this guy? And he seemed like he was on his way to go do something else, and was just kind of like, no, that gentleman gets whatever he wants because like he's a guest. He pays to be here.
Huh.
And I think that it was, at least the way I took it, I think it was almost kind of set up that way for a reason. Like Ashley should have taken note of who that guy is, but didn't, because he didn't really look.
Wow.
Like that might come around later, because like he should have stopped and looked at either where he is, because he's near the outskirts, and we find out later from another line, or no, I'm sorry, it was when the host first greets William, and she says, the further you go, the more intense it gets.
Yep.
And I think that maybe had Ashley looked and seen where this guy was, because it seems like a location that's a little more remote. And if he had either noticed who it was or where it was, he may have paid a little more attention. I mean, if the man in black was somebody who was not supposed to be there, I feel like he would have been caught coming in.
Some other system would have.
Yeah, exactly. Like some
him.
sort of screening system would have caught him on his way in.
Yeah.
But it could very well have been like, you know, like a card, like a platinum diamond card holder or something, like a casino where they let you do
super rewards.
Yeah, exactly. Like they say, oh, that guy, we know him. He's fine.
Yeah.
It could have been that. Or I just kind of took it as Ashley being like, he seemed like he was more focused on something else he had going on.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It was just the way that he phrased it, because I did write that line down verbatim where he says that man gets whatever he wants. It felt like to me like it was a very targeted statement, but I could also see it being like a, you know, he could say that man gets whatever he wants too, or something like, I don't know. So we'll see. That's interesting.
I thought he said gentleman, which is why I thought it was it was very formal. I thought it was.
Yeah, he said that gentleman gets whatever he wants.
I thought it was very recited and very just like, again, like it reminds me of a casino. It reminds me of the way that they would treat like a high roller at a casino, just like the way they look at the security cameras and just be like, oh, that gentleman can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I want to go back and watch that scene now.
Yeah. So we go back to the man in black, and I just want to say that the locale that he's in reminded me, this is where I was like, oh man, this is totally Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
Because it feels like they crossed the border to go down into Mexico, basically.
Like the first little Mexican town village you would run across. Yeah, definitely.
So the man in black kills a bunch of Donald's family, like different cousins and things that have come to defend him.
Oh, it's John Wick shit, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. He doesn't just shoot him.
He dismantles that tactical group of people. Yeah. And then he shoots the one kid through the wall. Yeah.
Which is cool because he's an old man. And I watched him. He's very visibly old. We've been used to watching Ed Harris in action movies for like 20 years or more. And he's so weathered in this show. His face is so craggy. Mm-hmm. And I just watching him shoot is one thing, but then watching him, he's very physical in that scene, and I thought that was really funny. And I was like, well, it's impressive, but on the other hand, they can't really fight back, can they? But at one point, one of them does grab him and like run him into the wall, and that really struck me. I was like, oh wow, that seems like more than they are allowed to do, which I thought was interesting. And again, it's the further you get away from civilization, the rougher it gets. Yeah. Which I thought was really neat. But yeah, the shooting the kid through a wall was really, either he's done that and that's where that guy runs and hides every time, because I've done that in video games where I've been like, I know where those bad guys come from and I'm ready. Yep. So that was funny. I was like, yeah, he knows what's going on.
Yeah. And then after the bloodbath, the man in black ends up killing Donald's wife in front of his eyes, and he says it means you're suffering, and that's what's most real.
Yeah, he's got this great bit where he's talking about the way that they're all made, and he talks about emotions, and he talks about he likes the broad emotions, the basic emotions the best of all the emotions that they have programmed into them. And he says it's when you're suffering, that's when you're most real. Yeah, he talks about those very, very, very core basic emotions that we all have when you distill everyone down to their core. And he's like, that would be the easiest thing to program in a way.
Yeah.
It's the thing that you'll know
everybody
has.
feels it. Yeah.
No, it's
except
great.
for sociopaths, I guess.
Except for Ed Harris, yeah.
And then as just after he says that, Donald's daughter kind of pops up and spouts a line saying, "The maze isn't meant for you." And but she tells him, "Follow the blood arroyo to the place where the snake lays its eggs." That's kind of the next clue in the game. And Lawrence is just kind of like, "You got what you came for. Why don't you go back?" And the man in black says, "You don't understand, Lawrence. This time, I'm never going back." So, to me, and I know you said earlier, I think off air, that you didn't really want to focus on what the game is, what it means in the end. My quick one-off guess or something like that is that maybe it's a contest of like free lifetime admission to Westworld or something with that kind of line. It's got to be deeper than that or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter much to me, as you were saying earlier.
Well, no, it's not that I don't want to. That is correct. I don't want to focus on it. I don't think it's the main thrust of the show.
No.
And if it is, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's a little too early to determine, I guess, what the main... To me, it's a plot line. It's something going on the show. It's
I feel like that
big.
has to come to the end.
Yeah,
an end. And I don't feel like that's something they can stretch out for several seasons.
No. It's gnawing at me. Like, I do want to know, but there's a lot of other things in the show I want to know equally.
Okay.
So I do think because this is the kind of itch that's really difficult to scratch, this is the thing that a lot of online articles and websites and blogs, etc., are focusing on, as what is the game, so to speak, about and all these other details, because I know it's one of the most alluring mysteries because it's so faceless. We don't really know.
Yeah.
We don't even know what the mystery is.
Mm-hmm.
We can't even put words.
Is it actually, like, my question is, like, is it actually a game, or is it just Ed Harris, like, being like, there's got to be more to this attraction? The
fact that you use the word attraction is really good. It's like a guy riding like Splash Mountain repeatedly, but there's got to be more to Splash Mountain.
Where's the secret door? But I'm not convinced that this game that he's playing is actually something that they intend.
Oh, I think it is. I mean, he pulled a dude's scalp off, and there was a map underneath it.
That's true.
There's something going on, definitely. How he found out about it, or how he even knew where to start, is definitely something we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. But I think there is undoubtedly something going on, some sort of Easter egg hunt.
Yeah.
Because it is a game, kind of. I mean, like it's no accident that we've been making all these parallels to video games with it, and we're not the only ones.
That's
Lots
true.
of people are.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot like a video game. I guess there's no more.
So there might be that big.
But there's
way to beat it or something.
Yeah, there's some sort of prize, I think he thinks, at the end. But this idea of the maze is very interesting. Like, what is it? Where is it? I guess maybe when I said earlier that I think that the elevator was what he was trying to reach. I don't think it's necessarily that elevator, but I think he's trying to find a way to reach sort of the command structure. And I don't know why, I guess, but I think partially, and this is probably just the worst reasoning, I think part of the reason I think that is because we got those moments of the gunslinger in the film in the command center, and it was such a disruption of the natural order of things. And we do kind of get that in this episode in a little bit. But I think something about seeing that man in all black roaming those command center halls is something that has to happen again, because it's so striking and so scary.
That cowboy running through the futuristic hallway.
Yeah. It's very, I don't want to say iconic, because Westworld's not some grand slam cultural phenomenon, but it kind of is.
It's very visually striking.
Yes.
And just
those dead echo footfalls of those boots going through the hallway.
It's very cinematic.
Right.
Like it's a.
So just because that's in the film is probably a terrible reason for me to think it has to happen in the show, but it kind of feels like that's where Ed Harris wants to get, either because he wants to know ultimately how it works, how it happened, like Lance famously said to me. How does it happen? It was like one of my favorite Lance lines ever. We'll have to get Lance on this show at some point.
Absolutely.
But I think that's kind of his goal, is to figure out. I feel like he's got to have a conversation with Ford or something at some point. I mean, it seems like he wants to get to the heart of why it ticks. It's almost like he's trying to get the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And wants to talk to the guy who created life and see if that'll get him a step closer. I don't know.
Interesting.
But that's a great.
Well, there's also suggestions on the internet that so there's an alternate reality game going on with this show. I haven't delved into it too much, but I've caught glimpses of it. You can go to there's a Westworld website where you can go and explore maps and read the terms of service for the park and get details on like how much it costs to attend and all kinds of stuff like that. All kinds of good morsels that I want to delve into, but I also want to leave for our audience members to go and check out more if they don't want to know all that stuff as of yet. But there's kind of this... God, where was I going with this? The idea... There's like a survey or a questionnaire or something in one of these that has a question along the lines of, you die in a car crash, but you can have an android created with your likeness and everything that you are. Is this still you? Is the question in it, or something along those lines. So maybe even in the end, the prize is that you get eternal life by becoming a host or something like that. But we haven't connected enough dots to get there yet.
That's true. That I'm not going back could mean more than just I'm not going back to the real world.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, I want to dig deeper into it too. So, all right, we get back to Ford with the younger boy showing off his ability to control a snake, and he says everything in this world is magic except to the magician. Let me just
the little
slaughter
boy
some
thinks
lines
it's magic.
here. Yeah, the little boy is like, "Wow, how are you doing this? It's magic." And then he says, everything in this world is magic except to the magician.
I always make this joke with tons of movies and stuff, but I really hope that just happened on set and Anthony Hopkins just did that, and then they had to write the episode around it. He was like, "Look what I can do," and just
snake charmer Anthony
controlled a rattlesnake, and they were like, "Oh shit, start filming."
Glad the camera's rolling.
That was a great scene.
Yeah,
he had some great lines, but just before that too, as they were walking, I remember that it was a great exchange.
Yeah, I kind of pared down the conversations.
That was definitely the line that really was kind of the exclamation point at
yeah.
the end of the scene. It was really cool. But seeing the rattlesnake and again, I instantly thought of the movie again when James Brolin actually gets bit by the snake.
Yeah,
and that's their first sign that something's like really wrong. They're like, "Whoa,
that's not supposed to happen."
A guest was injured by a snake. That's not supposed to happen. What's going on? And that's kind of what makes them delve deeper. So when I saw the snake coming, I was like, "Oh no, what's going to happen?" But that was
we just keep getting these head fakes that Anthony Hopkins is going to die.
I know. Yeah, I keep expecting him to die. He's like Crispin Glover in Hot Tub Time Machine.
That's exactly where I was headed.
How does his arm get lost? No, I know. And like it's classic Anthony Hopkins when he's playing these like kindly characters. We're like, no, when are we going to lose him? We know he's going to die.
Yep.
No, it was a great scene.
Yeah.
I really want to know more about that boy. Does he dismiss him at the end of that scene?
Yes.
I think when he tells him to go back to his family.
He dismisses him, and then he sees this, I don't know if you know what it was. It almost looks like a burnt church spire or potentially like an oil well or both. Or I don't know what it is. Did you get any ideas as to what that was? It's
definitely religious in some way. There's
a cross at the top
of it.
Yeah.
Either he says later in the episode that it ties into something he's been working on for a long time, and I think he says something. Does he say something personal? Something like that. It reminds me of, and this is so random, but it's the only thing I can compare it to, and I'm not even sure if anybody listening will understand this reference. But in the Mad Max video game that came out this year, there is
2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, last year at least.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, so it came out last year, 2015. Did it really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's crazy. That game is very open world for the most part. You can kind of drive around and go roughly wherever you want to. Not that there's always something to find, and a lot of times there aren't. But when you are in the middle of almost in the middle of the desert at this one point, you come across, it looks almost exactly like that. And it's kind of a well with like, it's almost as if there was a whole church, like an old timey, kind of like the Church and Preacher with like a steeple.
Yeah.
That just got engulfed in sand.
Yeah.
And all that's open is the top, but you can go into it. and it leads down into the church, and then there's this whole like giant series of like catacombs underneath it that you can explore, and there's like enemies down there. There's not a lot to find, but it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I remember it really struck me when I found it, because it just seemed to come up out of nowhere. Like I was like, man, if I had been driving, a quarter mile in any other direction, I would have driven right past it and not noticed it. But I found it, and I had this really cool interaction with it, and I would have thought, and that you do get something there. I think it's kind of part of the story, but I think it's like optional. It's like a side type quest, because you get something at the end, and once you're down in there, you have to go back the way you came, and there's a bunch of guys waiting for you that followed you down in there. So there are story elements.
Classic Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly. There are story elements to it, but it felt like something that I found that I didn't necessarily need to find, which is really funny, because later in this episode, Ford has almost that exact sentence to Sizemore when he says it's when people find things that they will think that nobody else found before that gets them addicted. Yep. And it is those little moments that you find in games like that where you stumble across some special moment, and it feels fleeting or it feels important, and that you could have missed it, but you didn't. And it's those little things that really stand out in your memory. And that's exactly what that church reminded me of. Yeah. So that reference, there may be nobody who knows what I'm talking about, but I'm sure like if David's listening or some of the other standbys that have probably played that game, you might know. Yeah.
Interesting. We'll come back to that more. Maybe that's the entrance to the maze. Who knows?
Yeah, could be. We actually didn't even really talk about how weird that was. That little girl said that. There's something in her that was like programmed to say that. Or is it something that is programmed in all of them? You know what I mean? Like if pushed hard enough. I guess that's not true, because he goes back to that village for a reason. She's kind of the next chain.
It's like the bread. Like I guess the way that the breadcrumbs have worked, we don't really. The trail's cold up to Kissy. Like we don't know what came before Kissy. I guess right. Yeah. Right. But killing Kissy and getting his scalp gave him that map, and Kissy gave some piece of information to lead him to Lawrence or Donald. Give the man in black some information to get to Lawrence or Donald, right? And he
knew somehow where to go with Lawrence to take him back to the town. Almost as if Lawrence was like the catalyst that would get that reaction out of the little girl. Yeah. And then Lawrence apparently knew about it, because he also says, "You got what you came for." Oh, why didn't he spill his guts earlier?
Well, I think he just says, "You got what you like."
You got what you needed.
I don't necessarily know that he knew about it, just that she divulges the information and gives him the next crumb, and then
it's just interesting that Lawrence has no reaction to her saying that. Yeah. Other than just, you got what you came
for. It could be like we were talking last week, where
it is just programming.
His programming, he's not supposed to know this thing, but it also bounces off of him because he can't compute it. Right, right. Who knows? But interesting. No, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see more. It seems weird to hide that clue in her, and what are the conditions that he needs? Did he just have to survive that fight in order to make it happen? But no, then he had to kill the wife. I don't know.
He's like Gojo. He's like pushing the game to its. He's trying to break.
He's breaking the game.
Yeah, exactly. He's trying to find the corners and find the walls and be like, okay, I can't push this any further. It's really funny, because a lot of everyone there seems to be there because it is so immersive, and like a lot of people are there, like the man in black even says in the first episode, to get their rocks off, just to have fun and have escapism. But he seems to want to push it to its limits and break it and figure out how to finish it, how to get to the end. And so he seems almost kind of pleased when they fail to seem human, because like you're saying,
when he's getting to the edge of their programming,
to the root, exactly, and they literally can't do anything more, and he's like, okay, I've maxed you out, and I need to go.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about that.
All right. Then we get Cullen showing up at Bernard's apartment, and we learn that they've got some kind of sexual relationship going on. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, Bernard asks her to stick around, and they usually apparently don't talk very much, but he wants to talk. And she asks him why the hosts talk to each other when there are no guests around. And he explains that they're practicing, they're error correcting, and learning how to get better at conversation through interacting with each other, which I think is really cool. Mm-hmm. And then she kind of insinuates to him, like, oh, is our talking now you practicing? Which lines up with another internet theory that Bernard is actually a host. Right. But who knows?
A host making other hosts.
Yeah. But then we cut to Elsie in programming, taking another a more nuanced approach than the narrative people did to making Maeve more successful again, since she was flagged for decommission. She ends up taking a look at everything and seeing that her aggression was raised, but she was like, no, these idiots needed to just make her a little more sensitive or aware. She needs to perceive. She ups her perception values in order to be able to crack the repressed people that are walking through the door. And she also notices that she's got some kind of pain in her abdomen and marks her for a physical. And she also explains that the hosts do not dream, but they do know about nightmares, which is kind of a cover in case they're accidentally woken while in the Westworld lab or that kind of thing. But then we see Maeve back in action, and she seals the deal at the brothel bar. She ends up chatting with Teddy about sins and kind of makes it. Did you pay attention to that conversation? Because to me, she talks about his work, and we haven't gotten an idea of what he actually does. Because she says that her job and his job. She thinks her job is even though it's deplorable in some kind of form, it's better because they leave the men breathing at the end of the day. So it seems like Teddy's some kind of murderer, enforcer, lawman.
I think he might just be like just a gunfighter.
Hired hand kind of thing? Okay, the mercenary.
I think she just, and again, she may not know him. I think it might just be a judgment call.
Yeah, that's true.
He just has a revolver strapped to his hip, so.
Yeah. But then Teddy goes to make a toast, and he ends up getting brutally murdered once again by a guest who says, "Now that's a fucking vacation." Once again, I think it's interesting that we've gotten two moments like that now. First, the guy killing Hector in the first episode, and now this one of just when I watch these scenes, they just make me angry and disgusted at the idea that this is what the humans are partaking in this story. But obviously that's kind of the point of it all, is that, oh, this is fun for everybody, but I don't know why you'd want to murder people on your vacation. That's right. Doesn't sound good to me. And then Maeve ends up going to sleep, but she has nightmares. Once again, potentially a former narrative that she worked on, or that she used to be. It's her daughter and her kind of getting attacked by natives, but then they end up being saved by the man in black. So that must be some kind of memory from the past that we don't quite know much about yet, but it links Maeve and the man in black. So maybe we'll see them hook up at some point soon. Or maybe not. I don't know. And then we cut to Maeve in medical. The doctors say that she's been infected with MRSA in her abdomen, but she ends up waking up in the middle of the operation and stumbles naked into the body shop, kind of seeing all the other livestock being repaired and hosed down, a lot like a concentration camp kind of situation. And Teddy's there dead as well. But the medical people run in and inject her with something that kind of sedates her, and then they carry her back. And then we see Dolores standing in a field at night, and she asks, "Here?" and then digs in the dirt to find a gun. People on the interwebs are assuming that this is a real gun that can harm humans. Mm-hmm. And big implications there.
Oh, yeah.
And then let's see here. The final little thrust of story here. Sizemore announces his new narrative called Odyssey on the Red River. It's a very flowery speech that he gives. And he's they get to discover the most about their most interesting character, themselves, which just made me kind of throw up a little bit inside. And
the whole thing was like a pamphlet.
Yep. But that's probably exactly what he needs to do for shareholders and the people that would approve that narrative.
Or like a DLC summation.
Yeah, it's the elevator pitch, basically. Yes. So then Ford basically just like, no. He's like, I don't care for cheap thrills and surprises. And the quote that he says, "It's not about giving the guests what you think they want. It's not that simple," which is the Steve Jobs kind of line that you were talking about. He says, "The guests don't return for obvious things we do, the garish things. They come back because of the subtleties and the details." And then as he's giving that monologue where you said he remarks about how people find things that they don't think other people have found, we see William noticing and discovering Dolores in town, where she drops the can. And he kind of notes and hands the can back to her. And then it kind of cuts to Ford showing Bernard that blackened steeple. So what does that mean? Who knows yet? It seems we know that Ford is now working on some kind of narrative because he knows that the board is looking for a new narrative. So Ford has been working on something that he's apparently about to show Bernard, or maybe fill Bernard in on at some point in the future, or something of that sort. So that's the end of the episode. Any other thoughts on, discussion wise, or do you just want to go over how you felt about the episode overall?
I think, at least from that chunk, I think that I wanted to at least mention that Maeve's whole waking up experience was horrifying.
Absolutely.
It was so creepy.
Yeah.
And very, very, very well done. It was very unnerving. And while I was watching it, I was almost laughing, thinking like, she's synthetic, and yet I'm just like feel terrified for her.
Yeah.
Like, if this, who's to say this can't happen to us? You know what I mean? Like, this is going to be, to me, this is the dominant theme really about this show, is how thin is the line between the host's world and ours?
Yeah. Their
experience and our experience. And as I was watching it, I'm sure, undoubtedly this was the point of the scene, but I was just really struck by how effective it was.
Absolutely.
It was ridiculously disorienting, and I was like, she's in our world, and yet like at their office, these guys punch the clock and they go and do this.
Yeah.
And yet it was just like a nightmare land, and it was so good. It was just such a great scene.
Absolutely.
Thandie Newton is so awesome.
Yeah.
She's really good in this.
She did a fantastic job.
I did like her flashback also. I really am curious to know which storyline this was, and how her dialogue might tie into it in regards to like, this is the new world type of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like those actually are lines that she had said previously, and now they're just being retooled into, because Sizemore he thinks he's so clever and he's so like into himself and his genius that I could totally see him be like, I'm retrofitting pieces
cutting
of her
corners
past story
just to make his job easier, but also be like, oh, look how much of a genius.
Look how clever that was.
Yeah, that's possible.
I really want to know more about her story there, and how the Man in Black ties into it, or if. See, it is tricky because, like you were saying, they're programmed to think that those are just nightmares.
Yeah.
But the Man in Black is like, I guess we just have to know. We have to learn eventually how recently Maeve was rotated into her current role as like the kind of head madam of the.
Yeah,
the
well,
brothel.
we know that the Man in Black's been coming to the park for the last 30 years, so it could have been like at any point, and then now,
He looks the same though.
He does look notably older. It's not like they aged him down or anything.
He looks recent. So I am curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or if maybe that whole experience she's having is not a memory, but maybe it is a nightmare, and it's a combination of other things. Maybe she's run across him in the past, because he doesn't seem like he saves her. He's coming to hurt her. He kind of comes at her with that knife in a pretty menacing way, like he's checking under her head for.
Well, he saves her from the natives, but then he's very purposefully coming to her to.
Yeah, it's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
That Harris.
Great.
Great stuff.
Yeah. All in all, another fantastic episode.
I do agree. I think there's something going on chronologically here, but I still think that Dolores stuff is happening weirdly out of turn.
Oh or in some kind of.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the story is there, but it's either happening beyond something we've seen already, or it happened in the past, or I could be wrong. It could literally be happening overnight.
Well, as Ashley noted, she's the oldest.
Yes.
So
she's the first, right?
She's the first.
Maybe not the first, but the oldest that's still in rotation.
I think she's the first. I think so.
Wow.
Because he's saying and he remarks that she's been repaired so many times that she's practically new, which is another thing. That's another kind of thought expression, a lot like the question that I was talking about, where if you died in a car crash and we created something with everything that was you, the idea of if you have a boat and you replace every part on the boat, is it still the same boat? It's kind of an interesting
That is good. Actually, it touches on another Nolan body of work or another Nolan piece of work. But I will say nothing further because I don't want to spoil anything else that's not this show.
Okay.
That is interesting, though. I want to see more Old Bill. That's all I know.
Get Old Bill out of the...
Oh, man. Dust off Old Bill. Get him out there. That's who she's getting the real gun for is Old Bill.
She's got to get the gun down to Old Bill.
Got to get the gun to Old Bill so he can make his stand in the hallway.
Ed Harris is trying to find his friend Old Bill.
The ultimate badass in this world. So you can have one last gunfight with him with a real gun. That's how he wants to be put down, is by Old Bill.
Beautiful.
No, that I guess that scene with Dolores digging up the old gun, if it is for what we think it is, or that it is a real gun, that can't be in the past, because I think if a guest had been murdered by a host, we would have heard about it.
See, this is where I was almost kind of crazily connecting dots, is that like this is total wild speculation, total BS, but maybe I was thinking like, all right, because I've read somewhere, I cannot remember the exact thing, but somebody insinuates that there's been an incident in the park at some point in the past, potentially 30 years ago.
And it's been covered up.
It's been covered up or something like that. So my idea was that maybe when the Man in Black actually showed up for the first time, he was here with like his wife or something. And something happened where there was a malfunction and she died at the hands of the attractions. And maybe his need to figure out and to get into the command center is to exact revenge, and that he can maybe start using these hosts like Maeve and Dolores to fight back at the people who wronged him. But like I said, this is wild speculation. Who knows? It's founded on 2 seconds of footage in the entire thing, so I don't know.
I don't know. The Man in Black feels more nefarious than that to me.
Yeah. But that sympathetic turn to him could add depth to it, of the, like, if he's lost somebody at the...
It could. I'm not sure I want to see a Doc Ock with him. I kind of like him the way he is.
You just want him to full heal.
The OG gunslinger from the film was just an unrelenting force of antagonism, and that's what he is in this series. Just our heroes are the hosts.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that he's kind of like the Joker, where I don't really know his past, and I'm kind of cool with that.
Yeah.
He's just going to be this like tidal wave just sweeping through Westworld. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. I can't wait to see more.
If you fans have any crazy theories or you want to talk about things that we missed, you can please write to us at westworldfm@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of our show. Share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on air. You can send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. Once again, you can find more of our episodes on westworld.fm. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, all kinds of platforms. Please search for us there and subscribe, rate, and review, because the more you rate and review us on iTunes or any of those platforms, the more visible we'll be and the more successful our show will be, so we can give even more content to you. And the Midwest Podcast Network also has a video game podcast called the Midwest Game Nerds Podcast. You can check that out at midwestgamenerds.com. And we also are going to be starting a new podcast called Horror Movie Yearbook, which will be available at horrormovieyearbook.com. So check that out as well. That's it for our episode this week. We're excited for the next episode, and we'll have another episode of our podcast out after that. But until then, may you rest and have a deep and dreamless slumber.